Before we get in the video, I want to say thank you for everybody that comes and supports, and welcome anybody new. And if you're a fan of anything scary, horror, true crime, consider subscribing, hitting the like, and comment what you want to see next. And without you guys, I couldn't do any of this, and I really appreciate you guys. And the videos are just going to get better with you guys. And as always, let's get into the video. Cannibals. Something that seems so horrid. That can't be true, right? But it is true. And there's nasty, sickening people that indulge in that nasty taboo. And no more infamous than the person that we're going to cover today, and the serial killer, Jeffery Dahmer. This is going to be a very sickening and depraved video, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. Born May 21st, 1960 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Jeffery Dahmer was the oldest of two sons to Lionel Dahmer and Joyce Dahmer. Dahmer's mother was a hypochondriac, so she demanded a lot of attention, and she stayed in bed a lot. She even tried to unalive herself a couple times. She was very depressed and overall sick, and she needed help mentally. None of Dahmer's parents made much time for him or his brother. He later recalled, unsure of the solidity of the family. Dahmer was seen as a happy, energetic child until he had double hernia surgery before the age of 4 years old. And in school, the teacher said he showed early signs of abandonment issues. And in October 1966, the family moved to Doylestown, Ohio, and his mother became pregnant and had a son, and she let Dahmer pick the name, and Dahmer chose the name David. Dahmer's father even earned his degree that year and got a job in Akron as an analytical chemist. At an early age, Dahmer became fascinated with dead animals, and at the age of 4, he saw his father disposing of dead animal carcasses under the house that was stinking up the place, and he was removing the bones, and Dahmer found that satisfying. He would play with the tiny bones, hitting it on the pan, calling them his fiddlesticks. His father later shared that Dahmer would feel animals' organs and see where all the bones and organs felt like. He would even take trash bags and collect dead animals on the side of the road and dissect them and decapitate them and keep their bones. He'd even keep the bones in formaldehyde. And one day they were eating dinner. They were eating chicken dinner. He asked his father what would happen if you put the chicken bones in bleach. And his father thought of just curiosity for a scientific experience, an experiment, because him and Dahmer would do a lot of experiments together. He thought that's what Dahmer wanted to know, and he showed him how to properly and safely bleach the bones. And so Dahmer would use that in preserving the bones later on. And in 1975, a friend recalled that Dahmer decapitated a dog, nailed its body to a tree in the woods, and put its head on a stick. And in freshman year of high school, he was seen as an outcast. And by the age of 14, he became an alcoholic. He would hide his liquor in a jacket he wore at school. And the kids would ask, "Why are you always drunk?" And he'd say, "Alcohol is his medicine." The staff said Dahmer was an intellectual kid, but he only had average grades. He eventually started playing tennis and was briefly in the school band. And when he hit puberty, Dahmer said he found out he was homosexual, but he didn't tell his parents. And at school, by the age of 16, he was known as the class clown, and he'd perform a lot of pranks to teachers or students. And by 1977, his grades decreased. They even hired a private tutor, but it did not help much at all. In that same year, Dahmer's parents got a divorce because Lionel found Joyce cheating on him, and the two couldn't stand being around each other after a while, so Lionel eventually left the house in early 1978. That same year, Dahmer graduated high school, and his mother moved out with David, taking him to Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, without ever telling or consoling Lionel. Dahmer was 18 at the time, and he stayed in the family house by himself. And the divorce was finalized of July of 1978, and Joyce was given the custody of David and required alimony payments. And on June of that year, that's where all the sickening things really start to happen. Dahmer commits his first murder only 3 weeks after graduating high school. He picked up a hitchhiker on the street that was coming from a band rock show. The kid's name was Stephen Hicks, 18 years old, just like Dahmer. Dahmer lured him to his house, saying they would, "Oh, I got the house to myself. We could drink. There's nobody there." And when they were hanging out and Dahmer saw Hicks bare-chested, it kind of stirred up his desires. And when Hicks started talking about girls, he knew there was no chance to be with Hicks. And after several hours of drinking and listening to music, talking, Hicks wanted to leave, but Dahmer didn't want him to leave. So he took a barbell, he bludgeoned Hicks, and then he strangled him to death with that barbell. He drugged Hicks' body to the basement, and then the next day he went to the basement and dissected Hicks' body. He buried the body, but then in a few weeks later, he even dug the body back up. He did that so he could take the skin off the bones and dissolve the skin in acid and flushed it down the toilet. He took the bones and smashed them with sledgehammers, and he scattered the remains in the backyard. He took the knife in Hicks' necklace, the knife that he used to dissect Hicks' body, and threw it in the Cuyahoga River. And 6 weeks later, Lionel returned to the house, finding Dahmer all alone. He didn't know his son was alone. In that August, Dahmer enrolled at the Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio, for a business major, but he failed and only did one term. He dropped out after just 5 months. And in January of '79, his father encouraged him to enlist in the Army. And he was a medical specialist in basic training. But he would also always get apprehended for being intoxicated. While stationed in Fort Sam Houston, his insubordination got the whole platoon punished, and so fellow troops beat Dahmer for that. And in March of '81, because of his heavy alcohol use, he was deemed unsuitable for military, so he was discharged. And in 1985, Dahmer got a job at a chocolate factory where he worked 6 days a week. And he'd also frequent bathhouses. He even tried to dig up a grave of a 18-year-old male that was freshly buried, but he said the ground was too hard to dig up. And on September 8th, 1986, Dahmer was arrested for disorderly conduct and sentenced to 1 year probation. And on November 20th, 1987, Dahmer persuaded a 25-year-old man that he met to go to a hotel with him that he just rented. Dahmer later said he had no intentions of killing the man. He only wanted to drug him and explore his body. But he said when he woke up, he found blood and he was all beaten and killed. He said he had no memory of it. He couldn't believe what happened. He transported the body in a large suitcase that he bought, filleted the flesh, and put it in garbage bags, and then he beat the bones to dust. He dumped them in the trash, except for the head. He wanted to preserve the head, but he found it too brittle eventually, and then he beat it also into dust. And then after that, he became actively seeking victims and became on a murder spree. He'd mostly lure them from bars, drug them, and then strangle them to death while they were asleep. But on January 27th, 1988, he was arrested for drugging and sexually assaulting a 13-year-old boy, luring him into the house to shoot explicit photos. A very vile and sickening act. He pled guilty to second-degree sexual assault. 2 months after his conviction, and before his sentencing, Dahmer committed his 5th murder. He dismembered the victim and permanently kept his head and genitalia. On May 23, 1989, Dahmer was sentenced to 5 years probation and 1 year in the House of Corrections, and was required to register as a sex offender. He was released 2 months early. On May 14, 1990, Dahmer moved into an apartment on 25th Street. He took his last victim's remains with him, and within a week, he already had his 6th victim, luring him to the house for $50. The victim was a male escort. He did his usual sickening acting of drugging and strangling the victim. Then he got a thing of acid and dissolved the bones, but he kept the head. He even spray painted the head. He also bought a camera to take pictures of the crime scene and the dead body. Very, very disgusting and sickening acts. A week later, he lured another man to his house, but Dahmer accidentally drank the cocktail drugged, and he fell asleep. And when he awoke, he noticed he had been robbed. Clothes were stolen and watches were stolen, around $300 worth. And in June of that year, he killed an acquaintance of his. and he tried to keep the skull and dry it out in the oven, but it exploded. 3 months later, he killed another victim, but he kept his bicep, his heart, his liver, and some of the flesh, and put it in a baggie and put it in the freezer so he could consume it later on. And on September 24th, he murdered another victim, but he didn't kill for another 5 months after that. And on February of 91, he started a sick murder spree again. On May 26, 1991, he encountered a 14-year-old boy, Konrak Sinsasumphone. If I mispronounce that name, I'm very, very sorry. He told him to take some pictures for him, nude photos. But Dahmer didn't know that was the younger brother of the kid he sexually assaulted before. He drugged the boy and drilled a small hole in his head and put acid in it. Dahmer went to a bar to go drinking, and when he returned on his way back, he noticed him, the boy, naked on the corner of 25th and State Street with 3 women around the boy. The women called the police, and when the police arrived, Dahmer kind of seemed relieved, and he explained to the police that was his 19-year-old boyfriend, and he would get like this when he drunk, and he said his lover had consumed whiskey that day. The women tried to persuade the officer that something was wrong due to the blood in certain positions of the boy, but the officer said, "Butt out and mind your own business." When the officer left, Dahmer took the boy to his house and put more acid into his skull, proving to be fatal. He committed more sick murders after that. And on July 22nd, 1991, Dahmer approached 3 men to take photos with, but only one agreed to go with him. And when the man arrived at the apartment with him, he noticed the boxes of acid, and the smell was sickening, and he asked what the smell was. Dahmer told him to look over there at his tropical fish and try to put handcuffs on the man. The man asked, "What's happening?" Dahmer told him to follow him to the bedroom for the pictures. Dahmer then brandished a knife and laid his head on the man's chest, saying he was going to eat his heart. 32-year-old Tracy Edwards, the man that was in the apartment with Dahmer, the one Dahmer was threatening to eat his heart, told Dahmer they're just friends. He repeated it over and over again. He said he wouldn't leave. He said all that to keep Dahmer from attacking him. So Edwards decided he was either going to jump out the window or run out the front door whenever he got a chance. He asked to use the restroom, and he asked if they could drink beers in the living room where the air con was, and Dahmer agreed. He waited for Dahmer to let his guard down again, and he asked to go use the restroom again. And when he got up, he noticed Dahmer didn't have the handcuffs or anything, so he punched Dahmer in the face and ran out the front door. Edwards flagged down 2 Milwaukee police officers and told them what happened, and they arrived at Dahmer's house. When they arrived, Dahmer denied nothing, and they found the big knife under his bed and the camera with the dead bodies on it. He fought with the officers, trying to resist, but luckily, the officers quickly overpowered him. While searching the house, they opened up the fridge and found a freshly severed head of a man. While being detained, Dahmer uttered the words, and I quote, "For what I did, I should be dead." And once they got a real search warrant, they found multiple dead body parts all around the apartment, especially in the fridge. The officer said it was more like dismantling someone's museum than an actual crime scene. And on July 25th, 1991, Dahmer was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. By August 22nd, he had been charged with another 11 murders. He admitted to his first murder and where it was, and they found Hicks' body remains, bone fragments, right where they said it was, so he was also charged with another murder in Ohio. And on January 13th, 1992, Dahmer pled guilty to 15 counts of murder, but he also pled insanity. But Dahmer was sentenced to 16 life sentences. Dahmer liked to tease inmates with bones of the food and putting ketchup on it, pretending it was blood. He even put a thing for Cannibals Anonymous, a sign. He thought it was so funny. Many people tried to take his life. One tried to slash his throat, but the knife broke. But on November 28th, 1994, Dahmer was bludgeoned to death with a metal bar of a workout equipment. In the prison shower, the gym shower by fellow inmate Christopher Scarver. May Dahmer never rest in peace. I hope y'all enjoyed. I know the story was very disgusting, sickening, and depraved. I hope y'all have a great holiday, and I want to get to at least 100 subscribers by Valentine's Day. If y'all could do that for me, I'd be grateful. But if not, I fully understand. I just want y'all had a safe, blessed holiday season. And as always, chat, stay safe and good night.